You are listening to Kubernetes Bytes, a podcast bringing you the latest from the world of cloud-native data management. My name is Ryan Wallner, and I'm joined by Bhavin Shah, coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. We'll be sharing our thoughts on recent cloud-native news and talking to industry experts about their experiences and challenges managing the wealth of data in today's cloud-native ecosystem. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. We're coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. Today is February 28th, 2025. Hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. Yes, you heard that right. It's 2025. It's been a while since you've heard our voices, but Bhavin and I deserve a break as well. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
What have you been doing with all this time, Bhavin? Did you go anywhere exciting, do anything fun, or are you just hunkering down and hoping for warm weather these days?
I was okay. When you asked me the question, I had to think about it. So I did a short trip to Italy over the President's Day long weekend.
Oh, nice.
That was fun. I spent 4 days and
what'd you do?
Went to Florence and then Rome. I think Rome was a lot of fun because again, I'm not a Christian, so I don't know about all the history and how of the church and Pope and things like that. But visiting Vatican, doing like a guided tour, that helped, and then Roman history as well, like new bits and pieces of it. Watched the Gladiator movie, but doing another
the old one or the new one?
I've seen both, but the new one sucks. I don't think.
Really? I was pretty excited about seeing it, but now you just put a real bit hankering. You put a damper on that. I mean, the original was so good, and the new one has great actors.
Really good.
So.
Yes. Like I watched the first one again before watching the second one, and then I was like, "What are they doing? Like, how could they spoil such a good movie?" But yeah,
I'm bummed.
Yeah, I mean, you should still watch it. Like they have an exciting.
I will, but I'll probably just wait till I can rent it,
stream it,
Apple TV or something.
Yeah. No, so the Colosseum tour and the Palatine Hills and Roman Forum, all of those things. That tour was awesome. Like, man, the tour guide that we had, he spoke for 4 hours straight. Like, I was tired listening to him. I don't know how he kept doing, and I'm sure he does this at least once or if not twice a day, and then says the same thing. Like, I don't know if I can do that job, but no.
Did you go in the Leaning Tower? Did you go over to Pisa?
Nope. No. Didn't make the hop. Yeah, I didn't have enough days.
That's a bummer. Next time. I've heard it's continually like leaning, but maybe that's just hearsay or a rumor.
No, it is built that way, right? Like it's not that.
I know, but I've heard that it's like, I mean, it could be totally conspiracy that I've bought into, but I've heard that like a very minute amount that it's still leaning.
It's still going?
I guess. I don't know.
People going on top and jumping so that they can use gravity to help the cause.
It's probably not true, but I like to think that it is because it makes it more interesting.
No, so that was a fun trip. How about you?
Did you eat anything good before we move on?
Yeah, for sure. Like I love the pizza. Like I know it's like not big a surprise, but yeah, it was really good. Like you get these really thin crust squares. I guess you can buy them on weight rather than a slice or a pie. And even for vegetarian pizzas, man, the sauce, the bread, everything was really good. Like I would recommend that.
I've never been to Italy, so
you should, man. Like it's easy. Like man, apparently there's a direct flight. Like I had to do a layover, but I don't know, super easy to get there. Language barrier wasn't really as much. Like so I was doing Duolingo. Had a streak of like 100 200 days trying to learn the language a bit so I can have basic conversations. I figured out how to say, "Hey, how are you? Can I get a table for 2?" But I didn't realize is what do I like? I don't know what they are saying in response. So
you can't understand them. So they think you're speaking, and then you're just like, "That's all I got."
Yeah, and then I was like, "Yeah, sorry. Like I know you said a few sentences, but I didn't get any of it."
I was just trying to help. I mean, I think
right. Yeah.
I think it is appreciated that you're trying, even if it's terrible, right?
So next time I need to learn what the response would sound like. Like so one of the responses,
or just have your Google Translate open when they respond or something.
That's true. Yeah. But I hate Google Translates. So for text, it's awesome. For just basic words, it's good. But if you want to take a picture of a menu and then translate it, in the past I've had a good experience, but not in Italy. Like it just, I don't know. It never.
That's part of the fun. Right. You just kind of like This one looks
Try to guess.
like it could be good.
Yeah, that's true.
Chef's choice, please.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, just for me, no meat, please. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have to say something like that. I'm a very I like experimenting, so I would probably just say like, menu roulette, just poof there. Well, I did not go to Italy or anywhere as cool. I went to Vermont a couple times, which is great. Did some
It is not cool. It is cold.
It is cold. I took a picture next to up in Vermont. I think it was the beginning of February, next to this icicle that was like as tall as me. Because it was that week, a couple weeks after it was like 2 degrees or whatever. Like, it was fun though. I did a couple different fat biking trips, which is always a blast if you like that kind of thing, or something. It sounds terrible to some people, mountain biking in the winter. But one was sort of an event, and the other one was just like a 2-day trip. But yeah, no Italy, that's for sure.
Do you have any trips that you want to talk about?
No more trips planned, really. No, I'm going back up to New Hampshire this summer, as always, but nowhere super fun. I've been trying to figure out how to get down to Florida in the winter. That might happen in April, but that's not even. It's like spring break.
That's true.
It's starting to get warm enough here where I'd be happy. I think if you got to do that, it's got to be in the middle of winter.
February, I guess. Yeah. Last year I did the same thing. Like I went to Florida for like 3-4 days because I need a break from all this cold, man.
I'm done. By the end of February, I'm done. I'm like, I like winter. I generally like winter. I went snowboarding a bunch, fat biking, but I'm like, I'm ready now. I need some
please.
Trees, dirt and grass and warmth and sun. Please.
Let's bring the 40 degrees, 50 degrees weather. Enough with the below freezing. I'm done. We did get a good amount of snow this year, right? Like Boston got like 28 inches this winter already.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, compared to last year, it was. I mean, any snow would be,
That's true.
be better. It basically just rained all last winter, which was kind of nice, actually. But all right, enough about weather. We have a fun show today. We'll introduce our guests in a little bit, but we are going to dive into cloud native news. We're not going to cover all the news we missed. That's just not what we're going to do because no one wants to hear that much news before an episode. But we are going to kick off with a few news stories from the both of us. I got a few more here, so I'll start, I guess. The first one I have is around Red Hat. OpenShift 4.18 is the latest version of OpenShift. And the main thing there that I wanted to kind of note, which is definitely been bigger news from the start of 2025, is their OpenShift virtualization stuff is GA, and some of their networking stuff that supports a lot of what they're doing there is GA as well. And this kind of just, I think it solidifies to me, right? When they're bringing things like VM live storage migration to GA as well, supporting more and more virtual machine use cases, everything with Broadcom that we talked about last year, it's coming to fruition now. Everybody's trying, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people are trying to find an alternative. OpenShift virtualization is a big one on top of, what SUSE has got going on and a number of other ones. So I think exciting stuff here. If you haven't been following what OpenShift is up to in OpenShift virtualization, definitely go take a look. This article will kind of, give you a little tidbits of all the stuff they're kind of thinking about. There's so much in the VMware ecosystem that, people are going to want, and it's so early in the OSV and KubeVirt world where there's going to be gaps for a while, but they're making strides.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Like VMware had 20 plus years to build the features that they had. Even though Red Hat moves fast, but 2 years is we have been hearing more and more about OpenShift virtualization in the past 2 years. I know KubeVirt has been a project for longer, but it takes more than 2 years to get all the features that customers need. So I think they're making great progress, right? Like they are building the right features that are more relevant, and then add other things that might be a nice to have, I guess. So I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean, even some basic stuff like the article I have talks about user-defined networking, right?
Yeah.
UDNs, and just getting things like when VMs move to making sure IPs don't change, and these are I would call basic needs
Yep.
of these types of use cases. But I mean, the solution works really well. I've been having my hands on it recently, and
Hmm.
it's very capable. I'll put it that
Yeah.
way. But
It does
if
what
you
it's advertised.
if you're a V expert, you're gonna know a lot more, and you're gonna probably find a lot more gaps. So,
Yeah. True.
all right, over to you.
Oh, okay. So I had one new funding round. I know the the market, man, it's crazy, but I'm glad that Kubernetes or cloud native focused companies are still getting funded. Uh, Edira is the startup that I'm talking about. We did discuss them when they raised their seed funding of $5 million back, I think, in October timeframe. They are now following that up with like a $15 million Series A. Seems like a quick turnaround, but again, I think they are focusing on an interesting use case where they want to deliver like a security solution that makes cloud native installations more secure by having better isolation. I know when we covered their seed round, we were talking about how they want to build a new Zen like hypervisor using Rust. So I think they're making good progress there. They also have another product called Edira Protect AI, which is again something that's new, right? Maybe you have a few
Mm-hmm.
customers using it or testing it out, but they market it as like industry's first secure by design solution that automates GPU configuration. So I guess bringing in some of those isolation capabilities in GPU. So in their funding blog, they did mention that the vulnerabilities that were recently discovered in the NVIDIA container toolkit, if you have something like a solution which is similar to theirs, your GPUs are already isolated. So even if you are vulnerable, you might not be exploitable. So I think they're going after a good space, obviously tying it into an AI use case and talking about GPUs and NVIDIA. That obviously gets you money, but a good startup in our ecosystem for sure.
Yep, fun stuff. The other story I had was back around security. So Tenable security findings, specifically. This is another cloud risk report. This was actually done in 2024, but the article is from February 2025.
Hmm.
Goes into a lot of the things I think we talked about last year on our security episodes, which
Yep.
was things like misconfigurations, publicly accessible API servers in Kubernetes, um, you know, uh, IAM credentials having excessive permissions, cloud storage being publicly
Oh
accessible,
yeah, all the
applications
hits.
having unremedied CVEs. So like it's a real challenge. I think is really just what this is calling out, and I think especially in 2025 and beyond, we need to be better.
Yep.
So I just, this article is more of a learning, resource around some of those common vulnerabilities. Maybe you can go back and take a look at everything you're doing. I know I've been working on an application that I have, Dependabot tell me when things are are out of date or have security issues, and it happens all the time. You really have to keep up on it. So
Hmm.
definitely go take a look. The other three I'm not going to go into in detail, but they're more about new releases. So Veeam 7.5 is now out, has some support for uh, virtual machines in Kubernetes, which a lot of the Kubernetes native solutions are now making sure they can handle virtual machine workloads that
Hmm.
are basically containerized in some shape or form, and be able to move those around. Kubescape from our friends at Armo is
Yep.
now in incubating phase, and Cloud Native PG from EDB is now sandbox in the CNCF. So some fun stuff going on there.
That's awesome. I think for me, yeah, I know we covered the funding round. We also have an acquisition that is kind of in our ecosystem,
Yeah,
uh, data
the one
stacks,
that a
and
lot of people are talking about.
oh yeah, and again, I wasn't expecting this. I know before we hit recording, I was telling you that I didn't expect data stacks to be looking for an exit, honestly. So I was surprised
Yeah, it wasn't
more
on
that
your bingo card according to your
yeah.
LinkedIn
Oh
post.
yeah. Yeah. Somebody is keeping up on LinkedIn. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so DataStax got acquired by IBM. So DataStax, I know we have had Patrick on the podcast earlier to talk about Cassandra and their Astra, which is a managed Cassandra service. If you were keeping up with them, so in addition to them being a pioneer or a leader in the Cassandra ecosystem, they also started to going after vector databases and building Langflow to help developers build AI-based applications and use Cassandra as a database. So they have been doing some great work. IBM is definitely surprising all of us, right? Like with Red Hat acquisition, that's doing really well. Just yesterday, they closed their HashiCorp acquisition as well, and now they announced acquisition of DataStax. So obviously, they're building a good portfolio of companies under them. It would be interesting to see where all of these fall. Do they still kind of operate in the alphabet model where each team or each company still acts as its own entity? But no, I think IBM might not have been the place to go or place to work for, but now with these companies, they're definitely turning that around for sure. At least for me.
Yeah, and their GM Ratika, I think, the blog post by her, right? There's some other things in here that are tailored towards AI too, right? So DataStax integration with Watson, I think, is planned, but also the fact that DataStax is the parent company of Langflow, the open source project, to orchestrate AI applications. So I think there's sort of a technology acquisition there as well for a lot of things IBM is been sort of focusing on in the AI realm as well.
That's such a great point, dude. Like IBM with Red Hat already has a set of LLM models, right? They call them the Granite models that are there, that they have open sourced. And now with Langflow and DataStax, they have and Cassandra based database. They have this strategy makes sense. I'm excited now.
You think so? But yeah, fun stuff ahead for the DataStax folks, and congrats to all those there enjoying the acquisition. Cool. Well, we have a really fun guest, a fellow DOK ambassador, Edith, from Percona. She's a technology evangelist there, and we've had the pleasure of interacting with her and the DOK community and generally in the Kubernetes community. She's a lot of fun. So she's going to come on and talk to us about what's going on at Percona and everything they're doing in the open source land. So without further ado, let's get Edith on. All right, welcome to Kubernetes Bytes, Edith. So glad to have you on the show. I know we tried to get this done last year, but we're doing it now. So welcome, and please introduce yourself for our listeners.
Yeah, hello, Bhavin and Ryan. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me also. I'm Edith Puclla. I work for Percona, as you know, as a technology evangelist. I also have a role as a QA in the Everest team recently. So I'm really enjoying. So Percona, for people who don't know, Percona is an American company that provides services and open source software for databases. So our main focus is databases. Our goal at Percona is to help our community and our users to run databases faster, better, reliable, and now on Kubernetes.
Yeah, of course. And there's a trio of DOK ambassadors on here. I feel like this is fun. So data on Kubernetes is near and dear to our hearts. So if you're listening and interested in there, you're in for a good episode.
Yes.
And glad to have you on here. So you mentioned Everest, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I do want to start with sort of the open source side of Percona, right? I know we had talked about this a little bit, but maybe you could answer, what does open source mean in the context of Percona and what you do day to day?
Yeah. For Percona, open source means sharing software that anyone can use, can change, and can improve for free. We know that. Open source is about also working together as a community openly, giving people the opportunity and the freedom to customize their databases, in our case, because that's our focus, without being tied to one specific company. Also, Percona believes that open source helps everyone by letting people share their ideas and improvements with each other in open spaces like GitHub or like, yes, this is what we do. And we are constantly also asking for feedback for people in our community. We have our forum where people can discuss about our open source projects.
Mhm.
We have also GitHub, which is open to discussion and feedback always.
Gotcha. And Edie, right? I think we had Peter, one of the co-founders of Percona, on the podcast, like maybe 3 years back at this point. And yeah, that's since then we have been following Percona and all the great
Yeah.
work that you guys do, right? So I wanted to focus like more on the recent times in the cloud native ecosystem or the Kubernetes ecosystem. What are some of the open source projects that people might be familiar with or are working on? I know you have a Valkey based solution as well, or you guys are a contributor to the Valkey project. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yes, most of our projects now are they are trying to get focused into cloud native. We
Mhm.
have our standard projects that I can say, for example, Percona Toolkit, the database
Mhm.
administrator use or PMM, but they internally they can be used also in cloud native projects. For example,
Mhm.
we have our projects for Kubernetes operators. We have Kubernetes operators for different databases, PostgreSQL, MySQL, and MongoDB.
Mhm.
So they work on clusters of Kubernetes, and after that we have also Percona Everest, which is we are
Mhm.
going to talk a little bit about that after. But for Valkey, this is one thing that is very interesting. This has a very interesting history. Also, it started in March in 2024 after
Mhm.
we know Redis decided to change the license of
Yep.
the code. It become um, uh, proprietary. So as a result, the community also and the developers they decided to fork the repository and they rename it as a Valkey.
Yeah.
And they are keeping the license as a BSD. We know Berkeley software distribution
Mhm.
license. Then after that, the Linux Foundation take the control of this project. Allowing the community send changes, have maintainers, contributors, and this community is still growing.
Mhm.
We as a Percona, we are big support of this project. We have maintainers also inside Percona, and the co-founder of Percona, Peter, is one of our co-founders. We have Vadim Kachenko, who is also a co-founder of Percona. He's
Mhm.
leading this project of Valkey for Percona. So we are sending improvements. We are improving the functionality that help companies also migrate to Redis. And as a company, we are also helping giving support for people who want to migrate from Redis to Valkey. So we are 24/7 supporting that kind of migrations. And yes, it's what we.
So in March 2024, was this like a fork of Redis before after they changed their license, or okay, so it is starting from the Redis code base.
Yeah,
It's just now an open source,
yeah,
and okay,
there was
cool.
a big thing. I remember the last year people were talking, "Wow, that's happening! Oh, how is this possible?" No?
Yeah.
But fortunately,
Yeah.
the community just was aware about that, and they just forked the project. And then, okay, what we are going to do, and all the process became right. Then the Linux
Yep.
Foundation started, and all the things. And now we have an open source project,
Yeah.
Valkey, and we are still to making better. Right, a lot
Yep.
of companies are getting into that and getting more popular. It's gonna be, I guess. Uh, Wait, it was yes. They are having also booths in several events. In
Oh
fact,
wow. Okay.
there was a SOCOM conference, State of OpenCon here in London, and they had also booth there. So they were talking about what is this about because not much people know that there is still
Yep.
being an open source project for Redis.
No, I think now the community is so proactive and I guess quickly reactive
Yeah,
on these whenever there are licensing changes. Like we saw
Yeah.
that with Terraform and OpenTofu as well,
yeah,
and Redis and Valkey. I also learned some time back that open search is nothing but Elasticsearch. So like all of these things are just new names and open source versions of existing things that people might be comfortable using. So no, thank you for sharing the history on Valkey.
Yeah, and we'll we'll include some links that
Yeah.
Edie gives us on Valkey if you are interested in that project specifically or have more questions for her as well.
Yep.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, Edie, and talk about a little more about running databases on Kubernetes. And one of the first things I want to ask you, since your role at Percona, you do various things, is what do you feel are maybe today, what are the challenges that organizations have, or maybe the most common ones running databases on Kubernetes today?
Yeah, I was thinking about this the last time because I had a presentation yesterday about Kubernetes operators, and I
Nice.
was asking developers in my team, hey, what you more struggle, because they are the one who daily support this kind of activities, right? The people running on databases on Kubernetes, and there was something interesting that they found, that is. The big challenges that they found is that organizations that run databases on Kubernetes is that complexity, and it requires specific skills for running databases. I mean, the knowledge that we have right now as maybe for Kubernetes, basic knowledge and even intermediate is not enough. We need more, because we are talking more about advanced processes for databases, no? And so many teams don't have enough people with the right experience, which make this adoption complicated. Some of this is because of the lack of technical knowledge, as I said, but sometimes this is also for the hesitation to start to touch something new and also complex. All right.
Got it.
Yeah, I myself, I'm included in that.
Yeah.
And the good thing,
So this sounds like it's more like Kubernetes has done a really good job, or the community in general has done a really good job, including operators, getting to a point where, deploying them and getting them running on Kubernetes is maybe a small percentage of really what you're going to have to do over the lifespan. And so this sounds like more like day 2 operations and beyond. Like, how do you manage these things at scale? And those are things that DBAs have been doing for so long, but maybe Kubernetes and our community, which focuses on sort of operations, doesn't have that skill set as much, is kind of what I'm hearing. Okay.
Yeah, the good thing, the good news is that this started to change, as you just mentioned it, right? The community is exponentially growing a lot. I saw communities, events, meetups, Kubernetes community days, talking about bringing this community ecosystem, cloud native community ecosystem, to places that we cannot even imagine. In the city where I work, with it lacks of a lot of resources. There are two meetups running about in Peru. There are running events for communities. So I was amazed about how everything is growing. Even you, through Kubernetes Bytes, you are bringing this kind of things to people. So the community is just growing a lot, and is the way how we are mitigating this risk of knowledge, right? And as you tell also that operations that companies does in the day after the day 1 of operations, it comes the day 2 of operations, right? Day 1 is everything is up and running, our database is running, but after that, there is a lot of stuff that we need to do. Scaling, backups, storage, failovers, replications. Oh my God, there is a lot. So how we can handle this? So there is another challenge that also Kubernetes operators is helping.
Yeah.
So Edith, I have a follow-up question there, right? So in the past, let's say in the non-Kubernetes world, I remember like early in my career, there were dedicated database admin teams. So there was like a SQL Server expert and a team that worked for him, an Oracle expert, and you relied on these guys to know all the level of details, all the intricacies of how things work, how they should be backed up, where the log files should go, how frequently they should be flushed, things like that. So with the community outreach that you just mentioned, right, like the local events where people are using those, participating and upskilling, do you see people who started with Kubernetes now being more trained on database technologies? Or do you see that the community itself is expanding and all those SQL Server experts or Oracle experts are now learning more about Kubernetes and how they should change the way they operate their databases because of this new technology stack? Which way is the transition going?
I see the necessity. The database people that work with databases are seeing now, and they see that there is one technology that they can help to automate several things that I do manually. So the technology is there, but the step to start to take it is what is changing these days. They see, they listen about Kubernetes in all these meetups and all in the community, but they say, okay, the technology is there, so maybe I can use it for Kubernetes. But no, Kubernetes is used for stateless. No, I'm taking my word. But no,
Gotcha.
Kubernetes is also for a stateful set
Yeah.
application. So I can try to do it with my database. But here is the question again. They say, okay, should I jump just because everyone is jumping?
Yeah.
Question.
Sure,
No,
yeah.
sometimes we have to evaluate.
It's a fair
ourselves.
question.
It depends. It depends. Okay, is you have the knowledge to jump into Kubernetes. So the amount of data or the transactions you are doing is good to jump into Kubernetes. You have to analyze yourself if you have all these components. So then, okay, I need to scale. My application itself, my business itself require that I need to scale. So maybe it's a good idea to jump into Kubernetes.
Yeah. And I know, there's always going to be a line too where Kubernetes sort of ends and the database admin sort of begins again. It doesn't mean the database doesn't need to be administered just because it's running on Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Some of the operations get, somewhat replaced, like how you configure clustering or replication, those kind of things. But there's still someone that has to sort of, keep an eye on it, which, the metrics and stuff like that can come out of Kubernetes, but still someone has to know what they're looking at or manage schema migrations. I don't think Kubernetes is going to do that for you. Lots of other things as well.
And I don't.
So-
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, one more question, right? The traditional databases. I know when we talk about Kubernetes or modern cloud native distributed databases, we always talk about Cassandra or Postgres or Mongo or things like that. Like, is there a trend? Is there a shift that you see in the ecosystem that, oh yeah, I might be an Oracle expert, but now I know that my application developers or my application teams need me to be a Cassandra expert. So are they also changing the way changing the databases that they used to own and deploy as well?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
But what I see is that, for example, PostgreSQL is the most favorite database, and it is still being the most favorite database. It means I don't see too much that chain between that databases and yes. And going back also into your comment, Bhavin and Ryan, I don't see it as a Kubernetes operator, something that could replace what database people does, but it helps a lot. So database people or the team could focus more in what you say, Ryan, about monitoring what is after. Okay, I should keep the database alive, monitoring, observability, all that kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think in general, it's definitely more common, or at least for what I've seen as well, is when you have an organization working with multiple databases. It could be multiple of the same kind, right? It could be you're running several instances of Postgres, or even different types of databases, as you mentioned. You're going to find more of those use cases on Kubernetes than just like a one-off database. But you mentioned monitoring, and this is a good lead-in for the next question is, how are you seeing organizations monitor the databases when it comes to Kubernetes, and then maybe talk about how you see it in the Percona world as well.
Yeah. About monitoring, I saw that more people are taking this to the next step. There is not just about knowing what your database is doing, but there is more critical thing now that there are more tools available to do it, to do observability, and even now people are doing and adding features to do it with AI. So this is absolutely the next step of that. But I see that people have a very responsibility for that, for observability. So there are different tools that they can use for get even alerts in real time to know what the data, what the databases are doing, who is accessing to the database. Also to have real time alerting and warning. Okay, and they can fix before these problems happens. Right? They have real time visualizations through the graphical. Dashboards. I don't know if you see these dashboards. They are amazing because they give you a lot of information. I don't even understand all of them. There are metrics, queries, how your queries are going, which databases are getting a lot of queries, for example, for potential attacks. All that things and vulnerabilities, you can see it in your monitoring tools. Yes.
So you brought up AI, right? Like, how are how is AI affecting these monitoring capabilities? Like, are people moving to natural language based queries on their environments and asking how the databases are doing, or they're still going to those dashboards and looking at those detailed metrics?
I was really curious about that also
Uh-huh.
in some of the events, and I was wondering, but I was reading that people are in this stage, they are in testing period, I can say.
Sure.
They are
Yeah.
trying because they don't want to jump into AI and start to take it and say, let's do it.
Yep.
Imagine they have some issue and you, you forgot, a false positive is what they call, right? False
Yeah.
positive.
Right.
And you
Yeah.
just ignore that alerting. That could be a big vulnerability. They are
Hmm.
in this state, they are just investigating, they are checking. And I think they are seeing what is worth to have it. What is
Yep.
Yeah.
worth to
Yeah.
have it. But I don't see something that I didn't see something that is okay. This is AI is helping in this way, and we are going to start to use it from now for this, for this. But for example, if you have a lot of log for troubleshooting, you can
Sure.
use AI to get okay
Yes.
which one in which part I can get these vulnerabilities and how I can fix it. That, and you can align that one with your guians that the guian said that the standard documentation that you have. Okay,
Hmm.
you do a match, and you can in some way you can reduce the time consuming that you
Oh
was
yeah.
having before,
Man,
right?
Yeah.
those AI, like asking the ability to ask AI questions about my, I don't know, 10,000 line log file is definitely helpful. So I think one more question on this, right? Do you see people being more comfortable with vendor specific AI solutions? So like if I'm using a specific monitoring tool or observability tool, use an AI chatbot there to ask questions about my logs, or take all of that log, put it in like an open AI or a Gemini prompt, and then ask it questions. Like, where do you see this happening? Like vendor specific solutions, or something that's more centralized that can answer all kinds of questions, not just database related questions?
That's a good question. I don't have a visibility for that, to be honest.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm not in that step yet, but I can see as I can put in that place. I can put in the place of one people, and I would like to have some centralized things whether I can,
Yeah.
yeah, I can.
More than one thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Agree.
yeah,
Agree.
but for testing purposes, yes, then I think in 1 year we are going to start to say, hey, this works, this doesn't work. So we are going to start to replicate.
So are you saying you need to come back on this podcast in a year to
Yes,
talk more
we
about
will.
that?
You know, it's going to be different. We are not, maybe it's going to be totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like a big differentiator today is you sort of, as an individual using AI, you still need the background knowledge in
Yeah,
order to understand that you're possibly getting a false negative, or know enough to look into what it's telling you.
Yeah.
Versus when you can go to an AI solution and not have that skill set yet, and get
Mhm.
actionable information out of it because you don't know how to double click
Yep.
and
yeah,
kind of dig into it. That'd be I think maybe the next phase once we can fully trust it. But
yeah.
I do want to ask one more question on the monitoring side of things. Now, Kubernetes gives you monitoring solutions out of the box, but we did mention Percona monitoring and management,
Yeah.
which is another open source observability project from you.
Yeah.
How does that differ from what you get out of the box from Kubernetes?
Yeah, Percona Monitoring and Management, PMM, also is very popular. I was surprised because a lot of people, when I go into talks, they know about it, they are using, and they have positive feedback about it. It's
Mhm.
open source completely, and it lets you monitor databases like MySQL, PostgreSQL, and MongoDB. Um, it offers detailed performance metrics, query analytics, and tracking slow when your queries are slow, and notify with a database potential issues. For example, I saw that people are more using open source also because they have
Mhm.
the flexibility to change, and it is not difficult to install. I mean, the documentation, there is a lot of documentation there that people can just go and jump and do the solution by themselves. But sometimes it's a little bit difficult to go by yourself. So
Mhm.
it's where we Percona we enter into action, and we have support for people who are not able to do into the next step. Maybe for instance, Percona monitoring and management, or this kind of tools. So
Mhm.
we are helping with that kind of support. But
Gotcha.
answering your question, Ryan, I see that uh, people likes flexibility. They don't like to be tied to a specific company. want to flexibility to move from one cloud to another cloud or to hybrid or maybe to use on premise. So open source is giving you that kind of flexibility.
Gotcha. Okay, so I think one question about Percona monitoring and management, and hopefully that is a good segue to my next question: is Percona monitoring and management a multi-database solution? Like, can it do multiple databases? And that being a successful open source tool out there, is that what led you guys to build Percona Everest? Like, okay, let's do more than monitoring.
Yeah. Yeah, we can have 3 databases, so the most popular and even more. I am not sure about the more databases that we support. I think MariaDB also is included and other databases. I have to check that. But yes, that was Percona monitoring was a big success for us. And after that, there are many open source solutions, and that is what I like about Percona. The mindset is open source, always
Yeah, open source first.
to the community, right? And this is how also they started to create Percona Everest,
So if we are in an elevator not recording a podcast, can you give me like an elevator pitch of what Percona Everest is, please?
Okay, look, Percona Everest, you will see, and you will be amazed using it. Percona Everest is a tool that you can install to monitor in your databases. What databases? MongoDB, PostgreSQL, MySQL, and you can have in real time everything that you need to check if your databases are running correctly. And you can solve the problem seeing just that kind of trace and metrics that PMM is going to show you.
Gotcha. So instead of all different database admins needing to learn their own deployment tool or deployment operator, Percona Everest gives me that one single unified operator or one single tool to deploy all solutions.
Yeah, that you can connect your databases with PMM and you can have the visualization of all your databases in one single dashboard. So you can also customize your dashboard. You can customize and say, okay, this is not useful for me. This is useful for me. So I will take it. And yeah.
Makes sense. So, Percona Everest, is it an operator, or does it also deploy operators that know how to deploy those various databases?
Yeah, you say it. Percona Everest, since we started to work to get into cloud native solutions, we started to build our own operators. We build operators for our three databases. For the 3 1, okay? Operators for MySQL operators. We call it Percona operator for MySQL, Percona operator for Postgres, Percona operator for MongoDB. Okay, there are focuses in our own solution. Percona Everest has his own operator. This operator acts like a orchestrator of the other operators. If you see the architecture of Percona Everest, you can connect as a user, you can connect through the CLI, you can connect with a graphical user interface, or even with CI, continuous integration, continuous delivery applications, you can connect with Percona Everest, and Percona Everest inside is managing these operators for each database, and the operator is managing the database. This inside a namespace and inside a Kubernetes cluster. So in one namespace, you can have 3 databases, 3 operators. You can have in another namespace, you decided you can have also just one database. Or it depends of what you want to achieve.
Got it. And now, in terms of managing those various operators, does Everest also handle things like updating those, or how does, if I'm the person who's sort of in charge of deploying Everest and making those available for my team, how do I go about sort of making sure Everest and the various operators are up to date, or does Everest help me do that?
Yeah. If you want to see what kind of operator you are using, the version, you go deploy Everest, you enter into the UI, and you will see what version of each operator are you using. It's gonna show you. Okay, it's gonna also show you. Okay, your operator is not upgraded, so you need to upgrade. It's gonna give you the option there to upgrade, but it's gonna give you the option to upgrade a specific operator, not all at the time. You choose what operator you want to upgrade.
Okay,
gotcha.
Makes sense.
Okay, so go ahead, Ryan.
All right, so getting into the specific operators, obviously they provide a number of different functions for Postgres or MySQL and the various other ones. Could you talk a little bit about sort of what functions those operators help with in terms of like, from day 0 to day 2, things like backup, restore, and other things?
Yeah, these operators do almost the same thing, but for different databases. In the case of Percona ExtraDB cluster, we have PXE, which we call it PXE operator. The PXE operator simplifies the complexity of running MySQL in a containerized environment, providing tools like backup, restore, and restore management.
Okay.
In the case of PSMDB, we call Percona Server for MongoDB operator. It manages replica set, scaling, sharding.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it does. Configuration in Kubernetes cluster. It also supports high availability and ensures that MongoDB cluster is always stable in Kubernetes. And the last is Percona PostgreSQL operator or PG. It automates critical database tasks like provisioning, scaling, upgrading PostgreSQL instances, and enable also high availability as the other operators in data replication.
Interesting. Wow, it definitely does a lot of things. So, two questions. One is, uh, if I already had databases deployed through the Percona operators outside of Everest, can I then start managing those using Everest? Like, can this work in a brownfield deployment? Or do I need to start fresh and only use Everest based databases?
That is a good question. I think this is where we are not yet. I mean, this is what we plan to do, that everyone can use Percona Everest and link their databases or their operators. So this is the goal for us. But for now, we are just supporting our own the Kubernetes operators.
Gotcha. And can I deploy Everest anywhere, any Kubernetes distribution, or is it very specific to like, oh, I can only run this on EKS, for example?
No, you can use Google, Azure. You can use I think OpenShift. Now we are in testing OpenShift. You can run. I already tested, but for production environments, I'm not sure it's ready. But for production environments, Google, Amazon, Azure, they are already tested for production environments.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to like the question that Ryan had, or the task that Ryan had mentioned, right? Like the schema migration or the or database migrations. Can Everest help me with some of those as well? You mentioned sharding in case of MongoDB, but what about some of the other database admin specific operations?
Yeah, with Percona Everest, you do it through the UI. You can do it in CLI as well, but in the UI, for example, you can create backups. You can create point-in-time recovery backups. You can restore a backup from a database, from an existing database, from existing backup. You can also configure the amount of nodes that your cluster is going to have in Kubernetes. In the case of PostgreSQL, you can configure PG boundaries. You can configure sharding. My MongoDB database is going to be sharding. Okay, how many config servers my MongoDB is going to have? You also choose that. So you have just to go and start to choose, and also you can add PMM. You can add Percona monitoring and management.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. So everything is integrated. So you're just clicking activated Percona monitoring and management.
Okay.
But if you have already installed Percona monitoring and management, no, you just link it and put the endpoint into Percona Everest, and it's already that. Also, you can give external access to people to your cluster, so people can access. There is one more interesting thing that it gives you. The details that Percona Everest give you is a lot, so you can see there how many resources are using, and also how you can connect to your database. So you can just copy the URL, go to the CLI, and start to insert data into MongoDB, doing all that time.
Fun.
Okay. Okay. One more question, and I promise I'll go and read the documentation or go read the manual. Okay, we spoke about database admin specific operations, but does Percona Everest also help me with Kubernetes cluster auto scaling? Like, obviously, I can expand or scale out my database, but how does it handle the underlying cluster? Like, does it work with things like AWS Carpenter or something else that can allow me to scale my Kubernetes cluster if I need more compute or more storage, I guess?
You have the option to change the size of your cluster in Percona Everest. you can change, you can add more CPUs, more memory. It depends of you. The amount of nodes also you can change, and you can even customize them. But I'm not sure if you can scale, like you say, in another database. If I understand correctly your question.
Scale the underlying Kubernetes cluster.
Yes.
Like if my database cluster is growing, right?
Yeah.
What if I run out of capacity on the Kubernetes cluster? Can Everest somehow automate that as well?
I don't have the answer for that.
Okay, I think
I have to
time to open a
do
PR, Ryan,
documentation as
like
well.
against the Percona project,
Yeah,
the Everest project.
I have to check if that's allowed also. Thank you for
Gotcha.
pointing out. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, those are all like really interesting use cases, and I think this is where, to your point, Ed, before, is that like, you know, you're talking about all these features that Everest does for individual databases, and there's a laundry list, right? There's a lot of things, but when you're operating it day to day, you're going to run into various things like inserting data or even doing migrations. And as someone who's using Postgres for an application and using things like Alembic to do migrations for a Python specific implementation, I don't think those things are going to necessarily, I mean, maybe they do make it into an operator. I'm not sure, but it could be application specific, right? And that's where like the intersection between like the operator and then the DBA and then the application team all working on Kubernetes and maybe a platform engineering team, kind of, they all have a role still, right? And I think there has to be understanding of who takes care of what, and maybe that's more of like a more like knowledge based building, through community type of exercise. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that is how it works. Everyone play a role into this implementation of Kubernetes.
Makes sense. So I do have, I mentioned that you are a DOK ambassador, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you, how does your role as a DOK ambassador sort of play into your work with Percona or even the open source community in general?
Yes, you are ambassador as well. Yeah, glad to see you there in the community. I'm ambassador for DOK community. As a community, we are working together, in find ways to collaborate, to create paper research, to create content, to have meetups and interview people and trying to connect members from our community to create working group together with people who are interested in storage, big data, and applications of data, also in data on Kubernetes, how workflows run in Kubernetes. For example, one of the things that we did together as a community was a very, very nice timeline where we put together all the database, all the Kubernetes operators for databases. So we put it together. So this was a community work, and we push it into the CNCF blog post, and is there for celebrating the 10 years of Kubernetes.
Yeah,
So that's one.
we've certainly come a long way, that's for sure.
Yeah, and another thing that I also saw in the community is that we working together and find these spaces to talk about the standards. For example, what we want to achieve is, as you said, there are several initiatives to create Kubernetes operators for different things, but we don't find one standard that say, "Hey, this is how we should do it," and we start to implement that way. Everyone is running in his own way, which is also amazing because there are different perspectives. But this is where we are working now as a data in Kubernetes, to try to find these spaces to discuss, and also to find how we can pass to the next step to standardize the process to build Kubernetes operators.
Yeah, that's a fair point, right? The operator pattern that goes into developing operators gives you a lot of flexibility. And just because there's one operator for Postgres and another one for Postgres or another one for they're all not built the same and off the same necessarily standard to provide the same type of things. And so maybe that's more of a that puts the onus on the person doing the research, right, of what operator they want to use. Really depends on what they're looking to get out of it, and maybe where they see that thing going. Because there is some sort of, I won't say you have to keep using one operator, but if you start using it, you're certainly going to get familiar with it, and you might as well, make sure you're using one that's being developed and kind of continue to be supported. So
each operator has his own strain, and it's gonna the work that you are going to do is gonna depend of how well the operator is rated.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, any of our listeners who are either looking to get in the data on Kubernetes or databases on Kubernetes, community, come talk to Edie, come join the DOK community. You'll find the three of us there. Even if you're sort of on the DBA side or on the application side, I would also say come join, all right, and ask these kind of questions that you might have that you didn't get out of this podcast or even out of the communities you're part of. I think we can all say that we'd welcome you there and love to have you there. So Edie, where can people learn more, either to find you, more about the Percona project, more about anything else that you want? Anything you say here, we'll put in the show notes so people can find it.
Yeah, I will share the links with you, so you can visit easily our documentation. But I suggest you to check our Percona community forum, which has a huge community members there, so people can discuss about our different projects, all our projects in open source. So also GitHub repository is a good way. People like sometimes interact with GitHub and start to raise issues and conversations, right? I like also our Percona website. You can visit percona.com. And we are in all our social media. Now we open Percona account in Blue Sky.
So wow,
we are
nice.
there. I hope you are there. I will start to follow as well if Kubernetes Bytes has Blue Sky. And for me, you can just type my name in LinkedIn and you can find me.
So, great. And of course, if you're at various KubeCons, I'm sure you can find you there as well.
Yeah. In KubeCon in London, everyone is invited to be there. So it's going to be really amazing topics. I'm going to be in Cloud Native University co-located events as a speaker. So I will talk with Divya and with other members of the community about how we activate community to grow in Cloud Native. It's going to be an amazing panel discussion. And also, you welcome to the Dayton Kubernetes Community Day as a co-located event as well. It's going to be the 1st of April. And this is going to be amazing because a lot of people is going to talk about workflows or Dayton Kubernetes. So you are invited.
I don't know, man. Ryan or I won't be there, so I don't know how great it will be. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, Edie will be there, so it'll be just as good. Yeah.
I'm lucky because I live here, so
that's true. Yeah.
Just kidding. Like DOK days are always great, right? Like, they have a ton of great content. I always even if I can't attend in person, I always watch the YouTube videos that they upload after the fact. So great session.
Me too. The same. I found very useful those.
Yeah.
Well, Edie, thank you. I'm glad we finally made this happen for 2025, and we'll definitely have you back on the show at some point. But thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and have an amazing day, Bhavin. I hope this is not the first time. I hope we have another podcast. But yeah, thank you so much for the invitation.
Of course.
Bye.
All right, Bhavin, I knew I'd enjoy that conversation with Edie, but what were your takeaways from that?
I think I like the Everest solution that Percona has, and the commitment behind open source, right? So obviously, having a multi-operator offering, usually when we see vendors do that, they usually close source it and have something available for free. I think when Edie was talking about the commitment that Percona has behind open source, I think it makes sense that they want to do everything in open, have like a graphical user interface, have Kubernetes based resources that they can use. I'm sure like they'll make money in terms of support and services, but still like being part of this cloud native ecosystem and pushing for data on Kubernetes in general, being a major contributor of the Valkey project, I think all of those things definitely I don't know, back the fact up that Percona is invested in this ecosystem for sure.
Yeah, and definitely one of those companies that is well renowned in the community. So they're doing a great job. I think my main takeaway from that conversation was, Edie is one of those people that interacts with the community quite often, and to hear her talk about how her feedback from folks in the community are still finding that that gap in, I guess, knowledge or skill set of sort of running databases beyond sort of the basics, right? As Kubernetes is now over 10 years old. We've been having stateful applications on containers for even longer. I think that just shows still how new the concept of a database in a container is for a team, not an individual, right? I think especially you and I and maybe some of this community are aware of how things work. But hey, running this thing in production, operators get you pretty far, but there's still a lot of knowledge that, a DBA would have that maybe they don't necessarily fully understand the operator piece, but the people who do understand the Kubernetes and operator piece don't have all the knowledge of the DBA. So it really just kind of talks about, I think there's so much more than just understanding the Kubernetes space, but really having the deep knowledge and teams and expertise, and having the DBAs come with us. We want them to be fans of what we're doing in the Kubernetes space, and we want the knowledge that they've had for running these things at scale for many, many years, I'm sure. So, I think, I guess it's not surprising, but it's validating to hear that maybe we're having more of those conversations. Like, hey, we're doing this. Now let's figure out how to do it really well at scale.
No, I like your point, right? The community is expanding itself and bringing in DBAs for the ride, I guess. Till now, as you said, it was individuals inside teams that were experimenting with Kubernetes and maybe doing some little work, maybe having new applications to run on Kubernetes. Now with this expansion, I think we can expect more and more usage. So definitely a good sign, and we are in the right space.
Great. Cool. So for the listeners, we'll make sure and put all the links, like the Valky project, PMM we talked about, Everest we talked about, all the Percona links that Edie is going to give us, and we'll put them in the show notes if you're interested in finding out any more. As always, please subscribe to the podcast and on YouTube. Thanks. We actually are over 500.
Yeah, we are, man.
After 1 year, which I feel like is respectable for this show. We'll see. And as always, if you have any topics you'd like us to cover for 2025 at some point, please just let us know on either website, Slack, email, whatever it is, and we'd much appreciate that. And as always, thanks for listening. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. I'm Ryan.
I'm Bhavin.
And thanks for joining another episode of Kubernetes Bytes. Thank you for listening to the Kubernetes Bytes podcast.